San Antonio, Texas, 6:18 in the evening. The parking lot outside the Alamo Heights Grand Ballroom was already full of luxury cars lined up under the string lights. Ryan Colton sat in his truck for one more second, his hands resting on the wheels of the chair folded in the passenger seat. He looked at himself in the mirror one last time. Then he opened the door. The valet did not look up from his phone. Ryan lowered himself into the wheelchair the way he had done every single day for 6 years. One motion, no hesitation, no help needed.
He straightened his jacket. He rolled forward across the asphalt, past a red carpet runner laid out for a gala happening one floor above the wedding hall, past a banner stretched between two stone pillars that read in gold lettering, San Antonio Heroes Fund Gala, sponsored by the Colton Veterans Trust. He did not look up at his own name. He kept rolling. A young security guard at the main entrance glanced down at the wheels, then back up at Ryan's face, and something in his eyes softened for half a second. The kind of look people give when they feel sorry for someone they have already decided they understand. He said nothing. He simply stepped aside. That was when Diane Marsh came around the corner, with a tablet in one hand and an earpiece blinking blue in the other. Diane had been the director of donor relations and guest experience at the Alamo Heights Grand Ballroom for 11 years. And in 11 years, she had never once let a wedding run behind schedule. She saw the wheelchair before she saw the face above it. She stopped walking. "Sir, I'm going to need you to use the service entrance around the east side of the building," she said, her voice smooth, rehearsed, the voice of someone repeating a line she had said 100 times before. Ryan looked up at her. "The front entrance ramp is reserved for VIP donor vehicles tonight," she continued, "and fire code only allows one wheelchair route through the building at a time, so I'm going to have you follow the yellow markers around back." 3 seconds passed. Ryan did not raise his voice. "I'm the groom," he said. Diane blinked once, twice, and for a moment her tablet lowered an inch. Then her jaw reset, and she smiled the smile of a woman who has decided a mistake in front of guests is worse than a mistake in private. "I understand, sir," she said, "but the policy is the policy, and I can't make an exception, even for the wedding party. So if you'll just follow me." Behind her, 3 guests in cocktail attire had slowed down to watch, and one of them, a man in his 50s holding a glass of champagne, let out a short laugh, the kind that escapes before a person can stop it. "Is that a joke?" he said to the woman beside him. "Did the groom lose a bet?" The woman laughed too. Ryan heard every word. He did not turn his head. Near the golden arch that framed the ballroom entrance, Karen Voss froze mid-step, one hand rising slowly to her collarbone, her face draining of color, the way it does when a person realizes the whole room is watching something they cannot control. "That's him," she whispered to the caterer standing beside her. Oh my God, that's Emily's fiancé." She did not step forward. She did not say a word to Diane. She simply turned her body 3 inches to the side, angling herself so that anyone glancing her way would see the mother of the bride standing near the entrance, not standing with the man in the chair. Ryan noticed that too. He had noticed things like that his entire life. The 3 inches, the half turn, the silence that answers a question louder than words ever could. He nodded once at Diane. "Lead the way," he said. He turned the wheels of his chair toward the service path marked in yellow tape, past the loading dock, past 2 stacked pallets of folding chairs, past a door propped open with a fire extinguisher, while behind him, through the golden arch, the string quartet inside kept playing without missing a single note, because nobody in that ballroom yet knew what had just rolled past them and out of sight. 3 months earlier, the community center on the east side of San Antonio smelled like fresh coffee and old carpet.
The kind of building that had been renovated exactly once, sometime in the 1990s, and never touched again. Ryan rolled into the life skills class the way he rolled into every room. Quiet, unannounced, taking the spot closest to the door. He told the instructor his name was Ryan. Just Ryan, a former Marine. Here because a buddy from his unit said the class helped. He did not mention the trust. He did not mention the 8-figure wire transfers his lawyer processed every quarter, or the fact that his signature sat on the founding documents of an organization that had quietly paid off medical debt for 400 veterans across the state. To the woman checking names off a clipboard at the door, he was simply Ryan Colton, participant number 19. No +1, no notes in the margin. Emily Voss ran the Tuesday sessions. She taught adaptive cooking, one-handed knife grips, stovetop reach from a seated position, the small mechanics of independence that nobody thinks about until they need them. She noticed Ryan on his second week, not because he stood out, but because he did not. He waited his turn like everyone else, elbow resting on the armrest of his chair, watching more than talking. He helped the man 2 seats down tie his apron without being asked, and when the man thanked him, Ryan just said, "Don't mention it," and moved on like it cost him nothing. That was the moment Emily decided she liked him. Not the jaw, not the eyes, though she noticed those too, later, when she let herself. It was the way he made himself smaller, so someone else could feel bigger. A habit most people spend a lifetime never learning. She did not know his last name for 6 weeks. She found out from a class roster, and even then it meant nothing to her. Colton was just a name, one of 19 names on a clipboard, sandwiched between a Ramirez and a Whitfield. She fell for the version of him that folded chairs after class, that remembered which of his students took their coffee black, that never once mentioned what he did outside of Tuesday evenings. Karen Voss met him for the first time at a Sunday dinner in April. The good china out, a roast in the oven, the whole performance of a mother meeting the man who might marry her daughter. She asked him what he did for work. Ryan told her he managed a small foundation, part-time consulting, nothing flashy. Karen's smile had not moved, not even a fraction, but something behind her eyes had already closed the file. A wheelchair and a vague answer about work, she said to her husband later that night, in the kitchen, thinking no one could hear her. That is not exactly the son-in-law I pictured for Emily. She never said it to Emily's face. She never needed to. The proposal happened on a Thursday evening at the Riverwalk. No photographer, no reserved table. Just Ryan wheeling himself down the stone path until the water caught the last orange light of the day and turned it copper. He planted both palms on the wheels of his chair, pushed himself up as far as his legs would allow, and held the position for exactly as long as it took to ask the question. Emily said yes before he finished the sentence. There was no ring box moment for social media, no hired photographer crouched behind a bench. There was just 2 people by a river and a small velvet box that had belonged to Ryan's grandmother, and the sound of a tour boat somewhere behind them playing mariachi music too loud to hear anything else. Now, back in the present, at a service door propped open by a fire extinguisher, none of that mattered to the woman with the tablet walking 3 steps ahead of him. Ryan followed the yellow tape past 2 stacked pallets and a rack of folding chairs, and somewhere above him, through a vent in the wall, he could hear the string quartet still playing, still unaware, and he wondered how long it would take before someone in that room understood what they were looking at. Not long now, he thought, just not tonight. 3 weeks before the wedding, Ryan's phone rang at 6 in the morning. Marcus Reyes did not call this early unless it mattered. "Ryan, we've got a complaint filed against the venue for your wedding," Marcus said. "No greeting, straight to it. the way he always talked when something was serious. A veteran in a wheelchair was turned away from a donor reception at that same ballroom back in February, made to enter through the loading dock, had his gift bag confiscated for, quote, security reasons. Ryan sat with that for a moment, the phone warm against his ear, the kitchen still dark around him. The trust had sponsored that February reception. His money, his name on the check. And somewhere along the line, a stranger in a wheelchair had been treated like a delivery that needed rerouting. "Do you want me to open a formal investigation before the wedding?" Marcus asked. Ryan looked out his kitchen window at nothing in particular, at the shape of a live oak tree just starting to catch the first gray light. "Not yet," he said. "I want to see it myself first." Marcus paused on the line, the kind of pause that meant he disagreed, but knew better than to argue with a man who had made up his mind. "You realize this could get complicated," Marcus said. "If something happens at your own wedding, we can't exactly pretend we didn't know beforehand." "I know," Ryan said. "That's exactly why I need to be there as a groom, not as a donor with a legal team standing behind him. People behave differently when they think no one important is watching. I've built an entire trust on learning that lesson the hard way. If I send a legal team in there before the wedding, everyone straightens up for one day, and we learn nothing real," Ryan said. "I'd rather walk in the way any other groom would. No entourage, no warning." He asked Marcus for one more thing. "Don't tell Emily. Don't tell her mother." Not because he didn't trust them, but because the moment people know they're being watched, they stop being themselves. And Ryan had spent 6 years learning exactly who stayed themselves under pressure and who didn't. At the back door of the Alamo Heights Grand Ballroom, hours later on the wedding day itself, a young woman in a black catering vest crouched down next to Ryan's chair with a bottle of water she hadn't been asked to bring. "I'm sorry about that," she said quietly, glancing back toward the hallway where Diane's voice could still be heard giving instructions to someone else. "Diane treats every wheelchair like a liability form," she added, almost a whisper. "She just doesn't usually say it out loud." Her name tag read Sophia. Ryan thanked her, took the water, and noticed the way she looked over her shoulder before speaking. The practiced caution of someone who needed this job and knew exactly how thin the ice was. Small kindnesses offered at personal risk. He filed it away the way he filed everything, quietly, without comment. For a moment, he thought about telling her who he really was, just to see her reaction, just to give her something back for the kindness. He decided against it. Not tonight. Tonight was not about being thanked. Minutes later, from behind a rolling cart stacked with chafing dishes, Ryan heard Diane's voice again, lower this time, talking to an assistant near the kitchen pass-through. "Keep the wheelchair situation away from the donor photo wall," she said. "I don't care where you put him, just not near the step and repeat. The last thing we need tonight is that in a donor's photo." The assistant nodded and walked off without a second thought. Ryan sat very still, his hands resting on the wheels of his chair, listening to his own pulse for a moment. He reached into his jacket pocket, thumbed his phone to record, not because he was building a case, but because 11 years in the Marine Corps had taught him one unbreakable habit. Write it down. Log it. Never rely on memory alone when the stakes are high. He was not trying to trap anyone. He was simply doing what he always did. Paying attention. And somewhere inside him, a small, steady voice said, "Not yet. Wait for the moment that matters." He had no idea how soon that moment would come, or how completely Diane Marsh was about to hand it to him herself. The reception was 2 hours in when the first scream of panic cut through the string quartet. The donor envelope, $250,000 in Gala pledges collected earlier that evening. had gone missing from the gift table. Diane's face went white, then hard, then focused. The way a person's face looks when they've already decided who to blame before they've looked for a single fact. "That man," she said to the event coordinator beside her, "the one in the wheelchair, he was near that table 20 minutes ago." She had not checked the security footage. She had not asked a single staff member what they'd seen. She simply walked straight toward Ryan, flanked by 2 ballroom staff, her heels clicking against the marble in a rhythm that sounded, to anyone listening closely, exactly like a decision that could not be unmade. Karen Voss reached them first, weaving through the gathering crowd with the particular urgency of a mother sensing the evening slipping out of her control. "Ryan, sweetheart," she said, her voice pitched for the small crowd now gathering. "Why don't we just get this sorted quietly, you understand? For the sake of the evening." She was not asking him if he'd taken it. She was asking him to make the accusation disappear before anyone important noticed it had been made. Diane produced a clipboard and a pen, holding it out like it was the most reasonable request in the world. "If you could just sign this acknowledgement that you were in the vicinity during the window in question," she said. "It's a formality. It protects the venue while we sort out what happened." Ryan looked at the pen. He looked at Karen's tight, pleading smile. He looked at the small crowd of gala guests now openly watching, phones lowered but ears turned toward the scene, waiting to see what the man in the wheelchair would do next. "I won't sign that," he said, his voice even, unhurried, carrying just far enough to reach the closest onlookers. "I'll let the truth speak for itself." Diane's mouth thinned into a line. "If you're not willing to cooperate, sir, I will have no choice but to involve the police and have you escorted from the premises immediately," she said. And something in the way she said immediately carried the particular satisfaction of a person who believes the rules exist entirely to protect her. A man near the bar lowered his phone slightly, just enough to catch the exchange on video without appearing to. "Somebody should check the cameras before anyone calls anyone," he muttered to the woman beside him. But no one in charge seemed to hear him. Diane did not check the cameras. Diane had already decided the story of the evening, and she was not going to let a few inconvenient facts slow her down before the toast. Nobody in that room noticed Emily standing a few feet back, one hand pressed to her collarbone, watching her fiancé's face for any sign of guilt, and finding only stillness. She had seen Ryan angry exactly once in 18 months, and this was not that face. This was the face of a man waiting. Waiting for what? She didn't know yet. But she was starting to wonder why her mother had not asked Ryan a single question before asking him to sign a piece of paper, and why that question bothered her more than the missing envelope itself. Somewhere near the back of the room, Sophia stood frozen with a tray of champagne flutes, watching the scene unfold, her knuckles white around the edge of the tray. She had seen exactly what happened to that envelope 20 minutes earlier, and she opened her mouth once, then closed it again, terrified of what speaking up might cost her. Diane raised her hand to signal security across the room, her fingers already curling into the gesture. That was the exact moment the main doors of the ballroom swung open, and a man in a gray suit carrying 2 leather folders walked in beside a woman wearing a Heroes Fund Gala Council badge, both of them moving with the unhurried certainty of people who already knew exactly what they were about to say. The string quartet stopped playing mid-phrase. For the first time all night, the room went completely silent, 200 pairs of eyes turning toward the doors, waiting to hear which version of the evening was about to become the true one. Marcus Reyes did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The room had already gone quiet on its own, the particular silence of 200 people realizing all at once that the story they thought they were watching had just changed shape. Diane straightened her blazer out of pure reflex, the way a person does when they sense the ground shifting, but have not yet worked out how. "I represent the Colton Veterans Trust," he said, opening the first folder, "and I'm here on behalf of the Heroes Fund Gala Council to clarify something before this goes any further." He laid a single page on the nearest table, the original wire transfer record, the founding documents of the trust, Ryan Colton's signature at the bottom, in the same careful handwriting he used to sign birthday cards. A guest near the front leaned in to read the page upside down, then straightened up fast, mouth slightly open, and elbowed the person next to her without taking her eyes off the table. "This gala is being sponsored tonight by the Colton Veterans Trust," Marcus said. "The man in the wheelchair your director just threatened to have arrested is the founder of that trust." The silence in the room changed texture, the way air changes right before a storm breaks. Diane's tablet was still in her hand. Her knuckles had gone white around it. "I was simply following the venue's security procedure," she said, her voice climbing half an octave higher than before. "I had no way of knowing his identity, and a name on a piece of paper doesn't change what our protocols require." She did not look at Ryan. She looked at the crowd, because some part of her still believed that if enough people nodded along, the moment could still be steered back onto the schedule she'd planned. Marcus opened the second folder. "There is also this," he said. "An internal email sent this evening from Miss Marsh to her assistant, recovered during a systems review the venue's own board requested after an earlier complaint about accessibility at a February event." He read it once, evenly, without embellishment. "Keep the wheelchair situation away from the donor photo wall." 4 gasps, scattered across the room, landed almost at the same second. Diane's jaw worked once, twice, no sound coming out. "That's a private internal communication," she finally said, "taken out of context. I was managing optics for the donors. That is literally my job description." Not once did the word sorry leave her mouth. Karen Voss stepped forward, one hand pressed flat against her chest, as if she could hold something in place there. "We were only trying to do what was best for our daughter's wedding," she said, her eyes darting toward Emily. "Please, you have to understand the pressure of hosting something like this." She was not apologizing to Ryan. She was explaining herself to the room. And even as she said it, some small part of her seemed to hear how it sounded, and flinched. Emily did not move to comfort her mother. She stood very still, watching, the way a person watches a building they grew up in slowly reveal a crack in its foundation. A member of the venue's own security team walked in next, a tablet under his arm, and confirmed what the backdoor camera showed. At the exact minute the donor envelope disappeared, Ryan Colton had been 40 feet away, at the loading dock, drinking a bottle of water handed to him by a member of the catering staff. That accusation, the one that started with Diane's finger pointed across a crowded room, dissolved in under 10 seconds. For a long moment, nobody moved, the whole room waiting to see if one more person would step forward the way Marcus had and say something no one could afford to ignore. Then Sophia stepped forward from near the kitchen doors, still in her black vest, her voice shaking but clear. "I saw who actually took the envelope," she said, her hands trembling slightly around the empty tray she had set down. "It was a donor's son. He thought it was a party favor. I watched him carry it to the coat check by mistake. I can show you exactly where." She had been afraid to say it 20 minutes earlier. She was not afraid anymore. Within minutes, the envelope was found exactly where she said, unopened, sitting quietly among a stack of gift bags. And the donor's son, mortified, apologized to the room before anyone even asked him to.
Nobody laughed at him the way they had laughed at Ryan. Diane Marsh stood at the center of the room she had run for 11 years, holding a tablet that no longer meant anything. And even then, with every fact laid bare in front of 200 witnesses, she did not say the word she needed to say.
"I did what I believed was correct procedure," she repeated one final time, to no one in particular, her voice smaller now, but no softer. Her assistant, standing off to the side, quietly set down the tablet he had been holding for her all night and did not pick it back up. The Heroes Fund Gala Council representative stepped forward and in a calm, unhurried voice informed her that she was suspended from her position effective immediately, pending a full independent investigation. Somewhere behind them, the string quartet, still not entirely sure what had just happened, quietly began to play again, softer this time, the way musicians play when they sense a room needs to breathe. Diane Marsh cleared out her office 3 days later. She did not cry. She packed her framed certificates into a cardboard box, one at a time, and told the intern helping her that the investigation would clear her name eventually, because everything she had done that night had followed the correct procedure. Nobody in that office corrected her. Nobody needed to anymore. Karen Voss took longer to move. It was not the suspension, or the security footage, or even Marcus Reyes and his folders that finally reached her. She had spent those 3 days replaying the moment Diane handed Ryan a clipboard, telling herself she had only been trying to keep the peace, that it was Diane's mistake to own, not hers. It was Emily, sitting on the edge of her childhood bed 3 days after the wedding that never finished, crying in a way Karen had not seen since Emily was 9 years old, that finally broke the story Karen had been telling herself. "You didn't even ask him if it was true," Emily said quietly. "You just decided how it would look." Karen sat down beside her daughter, and for the first time in the entire ordeal, said the word she had never once offered to the man in the wheelchair. "I'm sorry," she told Emily. "I was so afraid of what people would think that I forgot to think about what was true." It was not a grand apology delivered in front of a crowd. It was a mother on the edge of a bed, finally telling her daughter the truth about her own fear. Ryan never asked the venue for damages. He never gave a single interview about what happened that night, though 3 local stations asked. Instead, he sat down with the Heroes Fund Gala Council 2 weeks later and proposed something simple. A fund, named for the veterans who had quietly walked through service entrances at events just like this one for years without anyone noticing. An accessibility access fund to rebuild every entrance, every ramp, every donor area at the venue, so that no one would ever again be told to use the door around back. He did not ask for his name on a plaque. He asked the council to name it after the people who had never gotten one, the ones who came before him and simply learned to live with the back door. The council approved it in an afternoon, and construction crews arrived at the venue less than a month later, tearing out the old stone steps at the main entrance and pouring a ramp wide enough for 2 wheelchairs to pass side by side. Sofia Alvarez was offered a new position 2 months later, coordinator of accessibility programs for the venue, the first hire made under the very fund Ryan had built. She kept the water bottle receipt from that night in her desk drawer for years, though she never told anyone why. The wedding happened again on a Saturday morning in October, small, unhurried, at the same front entrance where Ryan had once been turned away. Ryan rolled through those doors himself, no assistance, one motion, the same way he did every single day. This time, the room did not laugh. This time, it stood, and the sound that filled the hall was not the sound of a joke landing, It was applause, the real kind, the kind that comes from people who finally understand exactly what they are looking at. Emily met him at the end of the aisle, knelt down without ceremony, and kissed him the way she had at the Riverwalk 3 months earlier, before any of this had a name. Somewhere in the back, near the kitchen doors, Sophia watched with a tray in her hands, smiling in a way that had nothing to do with her job. Nobody made a speech about dignity that day. Nobody needed to. The lesson had already delivered itself, quietly, the way the truest ones always do, in a wheelchair, rolling through a front door that had, at last, been left wide open. If this story touched your heart, tell us in the comments where you are watching from. And if you believe every person deserves dignity, no matter how they look, like this video, subscribe, and share this story with someone who needs the reminder. This is an original fictional story created for entertainment and moral reflection.